my point in this particular moment was that, in fact, that statistic that I think I know a third of the people who could vote voted is not actually correct. It's actually a little bit higher. But nobody says 36.3% because nobody's going to remember it. So everybody says a third because they want you to remember it.
So round up.
So here's another statistic I think I know, well, that I do know. In 1923, 40% of the members of the US Communist Party were Finns. They were from Finland or of recent Finnish extraction. Now, why do I know that statistic? I read that 2, maybe 3 years ago. Why do I know that statistic?
Because it's weird.
Right. It's like totally surprised me, and it surprised me so much that I first I told everybody I knew, and then I went and did all this research about who even knew there were that many Finns in the US, right? And I found out that West Berkeley used to be called Finntown, and I learned all this stuff because it was weird, it was surprising. So, one way to get people to remember something. I mean, I'm assuming, yes, that if we're putting something on the radio, it's because we think it's important and we want people to remember it. And if we want people to remember it, then one way to get people to remember stuff is to make it surprising. And what are some other ways to make people remember stuff?
Well, like you said, you learned about it or you remembered it because you told other people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make people who listen to tell their friends, you want to give them something in such easy a language for them to repeat it, so they can tell people.
And why would they repeat it?
Because they find it interesting too, and shocking.
What are some reasons people find so interesting?
I mean, the statistic I thought of was 1 in 5 women in the United States get raped or sexually assaulted in their lifetime. And I think a lot of the ways, because at UC Berkeley there was recently this campaign called Redefining Mine, which is women and men in solidarity did too. They would do write on their body and saying and sort of post pictures of themselves online where they were dressing how they want and saying I'm redefining my body and what I can do with it. And I think sometimes the way people make it important to other people is by adding a personal story behind it. I find that's very true with stories of sexual assault is especially women will be this happened to me or this happened to someone close to me. Because people will be 1 in 5, okay, yeah, but you can't visualize that. It's just when you're talking about the Holocaust, you can't visualize the number of people that died, which is why people did that paper clips project. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but anyway. Yeah, this school in the United States collected 13 million paper clips, which represented the estimated number of people who died in the Holocaust or something. And you can't even visualize 13 million paper clips, much less 13 million people. So with sexual assault, people will put personal stories or at this rally, people would wrote poems and share them with people to say this isn't just a statistic, this happens to real people, and then people are more likely to remember it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think you always want to be able to bring down the personal behind it, so it's not what does that mean if you name someone, and then to hear a personal voice, I think it does make a difference. But I wonder then, to me, remember then, or maybe is it education, an educative function, not just because if it's repeated, it's because, just to answer your question about why would someone repeat it, maybe because it affects them or because they learned something and they want to, in turn, teach someone else.
I mean, I think if you think it's important, if it seems important to you, right? So if it's relevant to your life is one way that people will remember something. So, and I think that we need to think about that because sometimes on our show we're talking about things that people don't immediately think are relevant to their lives, right? We might be talking about women in Cambodia and there's not that many people in the Bay Area who are Cambodian and, most of us have never been there. Many of us might not know anybody who's from there. So we want to give people some reason to connect with, I think it's a good idea to think about, what's going to make people connect this with their own life a little bit more. And I mean, sometimes it's just because it's interesting, because somebody's interesting. You know, sometimes I'll tell people, hey, I heard this really great woman on the radio, and she was from Cambodia, and she was talking about this, and you know, she was just, I mean, I did this interview, I don't know if anybody heard it, but a couple of weeks ago I interviewed this Korean woman, and she was from Jeju Island, and she was talking about this massacre that happened there in 1948, and I'd never heard of it, and the US military was involved. It was before the Korean War. I was like, wow, I can't believe I never heard of this. You know, she was so interesting, I just went and told all my friends, because like, I thought she was so interesting. So sometimes you don't need that personal connection, but I think it really helps. And it also helps, you know, one of the things they say, people remember the things that make them feel good. So like you heard that Rachel Maddow thing and it made you feel better about the election. So you might tell people about it because it made you feel good. So, you know, but also things that are very thought-provoking or well-written will also be memorable. So, you know, I don't think, like, gimmicks are good. You know, it's good to think about, is it uplifting? Is it inspiring? Is it, you know, are people going to find it immediately relevant? Are people going to find it useful? One of the things they say about shareability, like why people share stuff, is because it seems really useful. And I remember once I heard a Full Circle, and they were doing a thing about recycling and reusing, and they had this thing about what, there was a little segment about what you could do with your used, with your tissue, toilet paper and paper towel tubes. And I like loved that, and I just told all my friends, I'm like, oh my God, this is life-changing, and I like did it too. It was like you could use them to store your cables, like so your cords don't get all tangled up, and as you all notice, I like tend to have a problem about cables getting tangled up, and I was like, I like have, if you look in my drawer now, you'll see that like I have all these like tissue paper, you know, toilet paper rolls, and you can mark them like what they're for. This is so cool. So, you know, so if it's useful, people are likely to remember it, they're likely to share it. So that's, you know, again, I don't want any of this to seem like religion, because sometimes it's good to just put something on the radio because people should know about it.
Right.
But, you know, if there's a way that you can get them to, if you can think about, well, how can I get people to want to pay attention to this, you know, you increase the likelihood that they will pay attention to it. All right, let's listen to one more clip. Well, actually.